It is always great to take a look back at the end of each year, reminding ourselves of the highlights. I forgot this. Oh god.
Why, God, why?
Okay, forget this. Let's just streamline our view back on the gaming market and which titles that released this year had me drop a tear, overwhelmed me with joy, or excited me in other ways, resulting in a very personal top 10 list. So don't get discouraged when I don't mention Suicide Squad or Star Wars Outlaws. I am sure those are amazing games, but I haven't played them myself. So let's start off with the list and one small addition, since I am not alone in this video. He's far smarter than me and more good speaking at English than I am, but does he agree with my list? Let's see, and welcome a friend of mine who is also a small indie focused YouTuber. Welcome, Prozeon.
Hello, how are we doing today?
We'll see. If you agree with all of my picks, then we're doing good. If not, then this would be the last time we collaborate.
Well, as long as our opinions are the same, I don't have a problem.
Yeah, we'll see. But let's get started with my top 10 list of 2024, and number 10 being Ninth Dawn. And even though I haven't played first 8 Dawns, the Ninth Dawn remake, which was published in September this year, had me hooked. It is a pixelated, retro-styled hack-and-slash RPG with tons of customization options and oddly well-designed minigames. You can roll, hack, slash, I guess that's why it's called hack and slash, shoot spells, summon allies, craft gear, and improve your character with various stat points. It can be easily played solo or with friends, and while the art style is simple and reminds me of better times when I was young and still full of hope, it just works for 2024, although there is a first-person option as well, which just doesn't work for 2024. The minigames I mentioned are funnily enough a simple and yet great deck building game, and I know you love those, and a fishing game that is basically a vampire survivors game. It's addictive, it's simple, it's nostalgic, and I just love it, so this is my 10th place.
Well, I'd never even heard of this game, and it never occurred to me that a remake from back in the day would be something that would be that interesting this year.
Well, to be fair, you're an uneducated American, so I'm not even surprised that you don't know about this game or health insurance.
I know about freedom, dang it.
Well, freedom won't save you from the next entry, number 9. Ants took my eyeball. I mean, the title alone reminds me of the movie Airplane. Don't know if you know it, but this movie Airplane got a title translation in German, similar to The Unbelievable Journey in a Crazy Airplane. It has all in the title, just like Ants Took My Eyeball. We run through a roguelike, side-scrolling game with a bearded fella that got his eyeball stolen by ants and shrink down to their size. Luckily, this story takes place in the US. There are countless weapons lying around, which allows us to shoot various armed insects, dodge roll, double jump, and slide through procedurally generated levels in the hopes to retake the eyeball. A few tough boss fights are between us and the 50% remaining eyesight of our protagonist, and even though I haven't even got close to finishing the game, because I have the reflexes of a dead cat, I still loved every second of it. Although I have to admit, at some sections I was ready to throw my controller against the wall, but still, 9th place it is.
I actually remember you covering this game a while back, and while you said that you were reminded of the movie Airplane, I'm reminded of the Rick and Morty character Ants in My Eyes Johnson.
I guess his name is Johnson and he has ants in his eyeball, am I correct?
Yeah, it's Ants in My Eyes Johnson. Is what
Yeah,
it is.
1 out of 1. Well, we digress. Anyway, here is my 8th title, my number 8. Linked Banner of the Spark. An action roguelike dungeon crawler with base building and character customization on top of the art style similar to Pixar movies?
Wally.
Count me in. Linked Banner of the Spark is simply entertaining with short mission sections, a colorful base building system, cute little interactions with robots, and a sizable arsenal of different weapons. The grappling hook as a tool to catch enemies and throw them or spin them like Beyblades is fun, while I dislike the lacking map variety, telling me that it is not randomly generated but just reuses the same few sets. Everything else in the game saw me play more than I actually needed to for my usual video review. I was surprised what Hades brought to the action roguelike genre, and now games like Linked Banner of the Spark can profit from the general idea and the systems. Can't wait for the full release since it is currently only in early access, and this year my 8th place.
Yeah, I mean, I remember you covering this one as well, and it kind of reminded me a little bit of a game called Redacted, but there's a lot of differences between the two, but they kind of take that inspiration from Hades and kind of go two different directions with it. And I do like the way that Linked brings in the building mechanics and everything, and I think it has a little bit more to offer than Redacted did. It's still something that I think is worth talking about at least, as opposed to just kind of sweeping it on the rug as a Hades clone.
I do remember Redacted, and it is on my wish list, but I have not yet tried it out myself. While I like the comic book art style, I am a bigger fan of this particular Pixar art style, since one of my most favorite movies is Highlander. That's more manly, right? Number 7 on my list would be Spellrogue, a dice-based roguelike, which saw me spend over 10 hours in the demo before the game even launched into early access this year. With a rather clever skill system, impactful artifacts, and other temporary buffs, the combat system is incredibly addictive, with some skills requiring specific rolls, added up dices, or change their effects with a certain dice number. The variety of playstyles can be further impacted by spells giving us a chance to re-roll the dice or change its number in other ways to a more favorable side. With the 3 playable characters differing not only in visuals but also play styles, the replayability just increases through a newly added difficulty setting, picking various negative effects the further we progress on through the 3 roguelike map sections. While the gameplay routine hasn't been changed much during the early access period, the new skills, slight changes of mechanics and added features are just a bonus for the already amazing base the game had, seeing it becoming number 7 on my list.
Yeah, I feel like there's been so many roguelike deck builders and dice builders and all sorts of tangentially related games in this kind of genre. I do think this one had a lot of cool potential to it. I still, unfortunately, never gave it a shot. But I will say that of all the games that I have played this year that include dice, but this one definitely looked a lot more interesting to me, and I eventually will get to it on my list of games to play, but that will have to come at some point before I'm dead, whenever that is.
Well, depending on your lifestyle, you might want to get to this game sooner rather than later, but before I court death for you, let's go to the next number, which is number 6. An absolute banger of a game this year was, and still is, Soul Mask. And not only because of the visuals and the realistic physics, as an open world survival crafter with fast-paced combat, beautiful surroundings and a slave system that lets my European heart pump faster, I further love the vibrant base management we can implement with various NPCs doing the numerous jobs like crafting and gathering resources, while the building part has to be done by actual humans. But I don't have to tell you that. You were the one building a large home while I was screwing around trying to raid enemy bases and find more powerful slaves we can take over.
I don't like that word.
The prisoners with jobs.
Okay, that's better. That's better.
With the largest update yet, it grows steadily in its early access phase and now has mounts and also moving siege towers placed on elephants. I mean, this sentence alone gave me a semi. Easily in my top 10 list of the year, and it will probably be on my most favorite games of all time, period.
Okay, so here's where I need to step in, because I also have Soul Mask on my list, but I think it's in a slightly different location than yours. So I think I need to take over and kind of show you how the rest of this list should be done.
Okay, I mean, give it a try. I will neglect every entry you have, but okay, yeah, take over.
I'm the captain now.
I'm going to go ahead and pull a Kanye, and not the change my name and go off the deep end kind. The Kanye where I hijack this list and tell you all about what should have been on here. So with that, let's get into my number 5 game of the year, and that is the game that was actually my most anticipated game of the year, Senua Saga Hellblade 2. Playing as Senua, you set out to avenge the death of your lover Dillion. While the series was changed to be more cinematic, this game did everything it could to present you a stunning experience, whether that be through fantastic graphics, beautiful soundtrack, or an emotional performance by Melina Juergens. Combat took a bit of a step backwards, although I wasn't really upset by this, as the game still keeps you on your toes with your heart pounding with every intense sequence, and it felt like the point of this game was not to focus on Senua's past struggles as much as it was to have her step up as a leader, which brings new challenges and heavy decisions that need to be made. The journey is one that will no doubt make you reflect on your own life and the decisions that you've made, and for that, it was an easy addition to this list.
You know, I said I would interject or I would neglect every single entry from your list, and I can honestly do that because I saw you covering that game. I know what it is, and I will never play it. And it has nothing to do that I'm a scaredy cat and I am scared to get a deep insight in my brain. Has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with that.
Well, it's definitely not for the faint of heart, and I can tell you that not only were there some nightmares that I had afterwards, but I definitely decided to question what I'm doing with my life, and unlike the other times in my life when I do that, this one actually had more impact than those.
See, I don't need a game to question my life choices. I have family.
You'll see throughout my list that is a repeating theme in some of the games that I chose. In order to bring it back to a little bit better... Oh, no, this one actually has an existential crisis too. Well, then I guess I'll just keep this train of feels a-rolling with my next entry, and that is the Metroidvania game Crypt Custodian. As the first game I reviewed in my demo diving series to get a 10, I was actually really stoked to give this a go. In this game you play as Pluto, who is sentenced to clean the underworld for the rest of eternity despite being the bestest boy. During your adventure you meet a fantastic cast of characters, all with their own stories that you learn through collectibles, like a bunny who found a drawer full of candy, or the more common darker story like a frog who separates from their friend, looks up and... In the end though, the game has you master a ton of abilities to defeat a variety of enemies and tough boss fights. I do think the back half of the game is a little weaker than the front, so I ended up actually dropping it from my 3rd spot to this number 4 spot, but don't let that deter you from enjoying the fantastic experience that awaits you.
I also remember you covering that game, and since the last game you mentioned, and this game also had some form of existential crisis, let me ask you this. Are you alright?
Moving on. The bronze medal for this year goes to the Metroidvania Souls-like game, Nine Souls. Whether it's the hand-drawn, Taopunk aesthetic, fantastic soundtrack, or tough but fluid fighting style, there's just so much that makes you want to come back and follow the protagonist's quest to slay the 9 souls. With combat mostly inspired by Sekiro, timing your parries is crucial if you want to succeed in this 20 to 30 hour campaign. One thing worth mentioning is the fact that the game tells you a controller is preferred, however it should say that it's mandatory, as playing with a keyboard adds another layer of difficulty that isn't intended by the devs, and it actually almost turned me off from the game until I used a controller. Aside from that, the developers at Red Candle Games made sure to bring you an action-packed adventure that is really hard to pass on.
I remember playing that game as a demo version, and I had 2 thoughts about it. The first one would be that even though I liked the art style, there was one bloody cutscene that reminded me so much of Happy Tree Friends, where the 9 Souls character, whichever name it was, fell down a cliff and was as bloody as a Tarantino movie. And the second part is 20 to 30 hour playtime? Jesus Christ.
I know, right? That's what makes this game really, really fun and enjoyable, so make sure to check it out whenever you get a chance. The penultimate game on this list is Enshrouded. As one of the earliest games to release this year, it shows just how much I enjoyed playing this game for it to make it to this list and at such a high spot thanks to my wonderful gamer ADD. Doing a great job of scratching that Valheim-like itch, Enshrouded allows you to partner up with your friends and take out the darkness that is consuming the land. With 3 major playstyles at your disposal between magic, melee, and ranged, alongside a vast skill tree, you can set your character up to play in any way you see fit. There's an abundance of options when it comes to building and crafting in this world, and while it may be a little tedious at times, I really enjoyed going into large towers across the map and clearing the puzzles within. One aspect that is just really enjoyable is the fact that you never quite know what you're going to be faced with, which led to a friend and I running into a tomb of what seemed to be an endless horde of skeletons that took forever to deal with but gave us a great story from our time adventuring together. And those are the moments where I think the game really shines.
Man, you are so close to perfection. Seriously. And Enshrouded on the 2nd place. I can deal with that because Enshrouded is just amazing. It is a superb game. I loved every second of it. I cannot praise it enough. But 2nd place, really? I mean, so close. So close.
I really enjoyed it, and to be honest, I was really torn on what my my number 1 and number 2 were going to be. I think it was like, if people have followed my channel for a while, I think it's kind of obvious what my number 1 is, but I genuinely wasn't quite sure if it was going to be my number 1 while making the list. But just know that it was a painful decision to make one number 2 and one number 1.
Well, I don't know which is your number 1 yet, and I can tell you made the wrong decision.
Well, if you want to immediately go into my number 1... Well, if you followed my channel for the year, it may not come as a surprise that I have placed Indica as my game of the year. But believe me, despite the fact that my demo diving video on the game is still my most watched video on my channel, I really wasn't sure if it was going to hold this title. This short but emotionally packed game sees you following the titular protagonist, who is a nun, as she is accompanied by the devil and a task to deliver a letter. During this time, she meets a convict who speaks with God, and the dynamic between the two is full of questioning who someone really is. The messages at work are way more than just good versus evil, and the game even gives you a sort of meta interaction with the player throughout the experience as well. The juxtaposition of the art, UI, and soundtrack make things so interesting, and it's by far one of the most unique experiences that I've ever come across. Because of that, it distinguishes itself and made it my number 1 on this list. It even made its way into being nominated for the Games with Impact category at the Game of the Year Awards. It is sad to see some of the voice actors not make the cut, as all major performances throughout the game are pretty good, but there really isn't much else for me to say other than I believe more people need to be giving this game a chance.
I have to admit, I'm really not that surprised when I think about it that you picked Indico, because I remember how much you praised the game, but still, I am a little bit scared, not only for my sanity, I mean living with someone inside of your head, telling you to kick that kitten, push that woman, throw that stone, I can relate to that, but I still have to ask you, are you alright? Do you need any help? Something we can do as a community?
I will say that I don't know, to be fully honest. I think that this game, I didn't really think about it until you started asking me, but the amount of games on my list that are thinkers really does shine a light on how I think people, developers in particular, need to be spending their time making impactful stories. And I think the ones that survive the most for me are the games that really put you in situations that you are not comfortable with.
Now I would actually just finish the video saying something like, this was my top 10 list of 2024, but no. It's just a Frankensteinian top 10 list with half of my picks, which is why I will do the greatest hacker move and insert my remaining list into your video. Let's see you react to an actually good finished top 10 list. See you there.